You're not lazy. You're not naturally awkward. You're not permanently broken. But what you are right now is invisible, and you don't even know it yet. Let me describe your last 24 hours. You woke up tired. You checked your phone before your feet even touched the cold floor. You looked at the endless stream of other people living their lives, connecting, laughing, winning, and you told yourself that today would be different. Today you would speak up. Today you would finally let the world see who you really are. And then you didn't. You walked into a room, maybe an office, maybe a coffee shop, maybe a social gathering, and the moment you crossed the threshold, you felt it. That heavy, suffocating weight pressing down on your chest. The sudden, terrifying hyper-awareness of your own hands, your own posture, your own breathing. You pulled out your phone and stared at a blank screen, pretending to read a text that didn't exist, just to have a shield against the agonizing vulnerability of making eye contact. You hovered near the edge of the crowd, completely surrounded by people, yet drowning in an ocean of absolute isolation. When someone finally did speak to you, your mind slammed the panic button. A dozen browser tabs opened in your brain all at once, scrambling desperately for the perfect thing to say. But your throat tightened. You felt that thick, heavy block, that invisible gunk in the tap that clogs your true voice from flowing out. So instead of showing them your brilliant mind, you gave a quiet one-word answer. You offered a polite, terrified nod. You watched an awkward silence fall over the space between you, stretching out for 5 or 6 excruciating seconds that felt like physical torture. You watched them slowly turn their body away to talk to someone else. And in that moment, you became a ghost. Look, I know this because I lived it. I know the quiet devastation of being the best-kept secret in the room. You have the intelligence, you have the heart, you have the ideas that could change the trajectory of your company, your relationships, your entire life. But here is the brutal, unforgiving truth of this world. You are only ever perceived to be as good as you can communicate. You could be a 10 out of 10 in technical skill, a 10 out of 10 in loyalty, a 10 out of 10 in raw potential. But if your ability to communicate is a 3 out of 10, the world will only ever treat you as a 3. The promotion goes to the guy who is half as smart as you, but twice as loud because he knows how to project certainty while you hide behind words like just, basically, and literally. You end your sentences with an upward inflection, making every statement sound like a nervous apology, begging for permission to simply exist in the space. The deep, intensely loyal friendships you crave go to other people because you're so terrified of being judged that you refuse to let anyone see your flaws. You tell yourself that you just hate small talk. You convince yourself that chit-chat is for shallow people and that you're simply an introvert who only craves deep philosophical conversations. Listen to me. That is a lie. It is a defense mechanism. You don't hate small talk. You hate the vulnerability of being seen. You hate the crushing anxiety of not knowing what to say next. You hate the feeling of being judged. But what if I told you that the judgment you fear isn't even real? What if I told you that the spotlight you feel burning into your skin every time you enter a room is entirely a hallucination? There was a man who was drowning in this exact same quicksand. He was brilliant, full of potential, but he was entirely paralyzed by social terror. Before every networking event, before every party, he would sit in his car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, his hands slick with cold sweat, his stomach tied in agonizing knots. He would frantically try to script his conversations in advance. He thought that if he could just memorize the right questions, if he could just construct the perfect, flawless armor of words, people would finally accept him. But it was a disaster. When he tried to talk, he sounded robotic, stiff, unnatural. In his desperate attempt to keep the attention off himself, he would interrogate people. He would fire question after question at them, turning a casual interaction into an exhausting, uncomfortable police interview. When they shared a story, he was so eager to build a connection that he would instantly interrupt with, "Me too," unknowingly hijacking their moment and stealing their spotlight. He lived in a state of constant, exhausting self-monitoring. While the other person was speaking, he wasn't actually listening to a single word they said. He was trapped inside the prison of his own mind, desperately formulating his next response. Terrified of the silence that would come when they stopped talking, he was communicating with the world through a filter of pure fear. He watched the life he deeply deserved be handed to other people, people who seemed to possess some magical innate gift for human connection. He thought they were just born that way. He thought charisma was a genetic lottery, and he had simply pulled a losing ticket until the pain of staying the same finally eclipsed the fear of changing. He reached a breaking point. He realized that if he didn't tear down this invisible wall, he would die having never truly been known by another human being. So he stopped making excuses, he stopped blaming his introversion, and he began to obsessively, relentlessly study the hidden architecture of human influence. What he discovered shattered every single illusion he had ever held about how people connect. He realized that the magnetic, captivating individuals who command respect and adoration don't actually talk more than anyone else. Often they talk much less. He discovered a shocking metric hidden deep within behavioral science. Over 90% of our communication has absolutely nothing to do with the words vibrating from our vocal cords. It is an entirely silent, unspoken language. He learned that the human brain makes lightning-fast subconscious decisions about who to trust and who to reject in a fraction of a second. He discovered that we are constantly broadcasting our internal emotional state to the world, and for years his body had been screaming, "I am a threat. I am uncomfortable. Stay away from me." He had been crossing his arms, dropping his chin, and hiding his hands in his pockets, projecting a closed defensive shield that instinctively triggered anxiety in everyone he approached. He wasn't being rejected because he was weird. He was being rejected because his nonverbal cues were signaling biological danger. He uncovered the psychological framework of charisma. He learned that it isn't magic. It is simply the precise, calibrated intersection of two specific traits, warmth and competence. He saw that people who possess warmth without competence are viewed as sweet, likable pushovers who never get respected. And people who possess competence without warmth are viewed as cold, arrogant, and highly suspicious. The elite communicators, the ones who own the room, know how to masterfully balance both. He discovered the cognitive illusion known as the spotlight effect. The liberating, beautiful, devastating truth that nobody is actually analyzing your mistakes. Nobody is dissecting your outfit or judging your slight stutter because every single person in that room is trapped in their own mind, obsessing over their own insecurities, terrified of how they are being perceived. He learned that friendships and relationships are not dictated by fate. They are dictated by a mathematical formula: proximity, frequency, duration, intensity. He realized that to build a bond, he simply had to put himself in the same physical space as others without being threatening proximity, show up consistently, frequency, stay in the discomfort long enough, duration, and eventually deepen the emotional resonance of the interaction, intensity. It wasn't magic, it was mechanics. And as the data, the science, and the psychology began to rewire his worldview, he felt a surge of terrifying, undeniable power. He realized he was not a victim of his personality. He was the architect of his presence. But reading about the science of connection and the safety of a quiet room changes absolutely nothing. Knowledge without application is just organized illusion. He had to step into the fire. He had to test the theories in the messy, unpredictable chaos of the real world. He drew a line in the sand and committed to a 30-day gauntlet of brutal, uncompromising exposure. He was going to walk into the exact environments that made his chest tighten and his palms sweat. But he made one radical, terrifying decision before he walked through the doors of his first event, a decision that completely contradicted every frantic instinct his anxious mind had ever given him. He decided that for an entire evening, he wasn't going to try to be interesting. He wasn't going to script a single clever joke. He wasn't going to memorize a fascinating story about his weekend. He wasn't going to brainstorm a list of smart questions to impress the executives. In fact, he made a silent vow to speak as little as humanly possible. He was going to strip away all of his armor, all of his crutches, all of his desperate attempts to perform for validation. He walked into the crowded echoing room. The music thumped against the walls. The laughter of confident people rang in his ears. His heart hammered violently against his ribs. He approached a small group, his mind screaming at him to turn around, to run back to the safety of his car to hide. He stepped up, he made eye contact, and he allowed the silence to hang there. The terrifying, vast, empty space of unplanned silence, and what happened next defied every single piece of logic he had ever believed about human interaction. By dropping his shield, by removing his desperate, suffocating need to impress, he unlocked a psychological phenomenon that magnetically, uncontrollably pulled the entire group toward him. He didn't win them over with a brilliant pitch. He didn't charm them with his wit. He did something far more dangerous and infinitely more powerful, and that is when everything in his life permanently fractured and rebuilt itself. Not because of what he did, but because of what he stopped doing. He stopped trying to be interesting, and he started being interested. He didn't say a single clever thing. He didn't drop a punchline. He didn't quote a book or rattle off a statistic. He just looked at the person speaking, planted his feet, and held space. Absolute, terrifying, unfiltered space. When they finished talking, he didn't immediately jump in to hijack the story. He didn't say, "Oh, me too." He just let the silence sit there for 2 full seconds. He nodded slowly, and then he asked them to explain just one specific detail about what they had just said. That was it. That was the atomic bomb. The invisible wall shattered. The group leaned in. Their eyes widened. Suddenly, they weren't looking past him anymore. They were looking directly at him, starving for his attention, desperate to keep his gaze. Because in a world where every single person is screaming to be heard, the man who actually knows how to listen becomes a god. Listen to me. The empathetic pity party is over. We are done mourning the ghost you used to be. You know the pain now. You know the cost of your silence. Now it is time to do the brutal, unforgiving, agonizing work of tearing down the prison you built for yourself. You think elite communicators are born with a silver tongue. You think they just walk into a room and the air magically shifts because of their genetics. Lie. It is a lie. Charisma is not a gift. It is a forged weapon. It is a highly calibrated, systematically trained set of mechanics. And if you want it, you have to be willing to step into the dark and bleed for it. You want to know what the grind actually looks like? You want to know the exact blueprint of how that man crawled out of his social grave and became the most magnetic force in every room he entered? He treated communication like a martial art. He didn't read a book and hope for the best. He put himself through a daily excruciating gauntlet. It started with the mirror and the camera. The single most painful exercise a human being can endure. Every single night he went into his bedroom, locked the door, and set his phone against a coffee mug. He hit record, and for 5 unbroken minutes he forced himself to speak completely off the cuff about a random topic: sugar, travel, the weather. It didn't matter. The first time he watched the footage back, he wanted to vomit. The cringe was physical. It made his skin crawl. He saw a man who looked terrified. Slumped shoulders, shifty eyes. He heard a voice that was weak, squeaky, upwardly inflecting at the end of every sentence like a terrified child asking for permission to speak. He counted the fill of words. Basically literally they were a disease infecting his mouth. Most people would have deleted the video, crawled into bed, and accepted their fate as a socially awkward failure. He didn't. He woke up the next morning and did it again. He developed a sick, relentless obsession with auditing his own presence. He reviewed the footage 3 different ways every single night. First, he turned the screen over and just listened to the audio. He audited his vocal image. He heard the rush of his own anxiety, the breathless racing of his sentences. Second, he turned the volume completely off and just watched the video. He audited his visual image. He watched his hands shrink, his posture collapse, his eyes dart around the room. Third, he ran the audio through a transcription app and forced himself to read the exact transcript of his words, staring in disgust at the graveyard of broken sentences and useless filler. He realized that his voice was an instrument, and for his entire life, he had been slamming his fist on a single key. So he went to work, every morning sitting in the agonizing bumper-to-bumper traffic on the way to a job he hated. He stopped listening to the radio. He turned his car into a vocal gymnasium. He sat behind the steering wheel and did the drills. He did lip flutters until his mouth went numb. He did the siren technique, dragging his voice from the absolute highest, most ridiculous squeal down to the lowest, most resonant baritone he could muster. He sat at red lights looking like an absolute lunatic, stretching the muscles in his jaw, warming up his vocal cords, learning how to actually pull air from his diaphragm instead of choking it out of his throat because he knew that the world only judges you on how you sound. You can be a 10 out of 10 in your technical knowledge, but if your voice shakes like a 3 out of 10, the world treats you like a 3. He ripped the safety blanket of text messaging out of his life. He forced himself to stop hiding behind his thumbs every time he needed to send a message to a colleague, a friend, or a client. He held down the microphone button and sent a voice note instead. The first few days were torture. He would record a 10-second message, panic, delete it, and re-record it 6 times before finally sending it. But he forced the reps. He forced his brain to organize thoughts in real time. He forced his mouth to articulate without a backspace button. He weaponized his daily life to get hundreds of micro repetitions, and then he tackled the architecture of his mind. You know the feeling. Someone asks you a question in a meeting, the spotlight swings to you. Your brain hits the panic button. Your heart hammers against your ribs. A dozen different browser tabs open in your mind at once. You start talking before you even know what you were going to say. You ramble. You circle around the point. You talk and talk and talk, praying you accidentally stumble upon a coherent thought, watching the light slowly die in the eyes of the people listening to you. He stopped doing that. He installed a psychological tripwire in his brain. He instituted the 3-second rule. Whenever anyone asked him a question, no matter how intense the pressure, no matter who was in the room, he refused to speak immediately. He held his ground. 1, 2, 3. It feels like burning in hell when you first do it. The silence stretches out. The tension rises. But in those 3 seconds, the desperate panic noise in his head settled. In those 3 seconds, he projected an aura of absolute unshakable authority. He didn't look confused. He looked like a sniper carefully choosing his target. And when he finally opened his mouth, he didn't ramble. He used frameworks. He disciplined his chaotic mind to speak in structures. If someone asked for his opinion, he used the PR method: point, reason, example. He made his point with ruthless clarity. He gave the core reason. He dropped a vivid, specific example, and then he shut up. If someone asked him a complex question on the spot, he deployed the 321 protocol. 3 steps, 2 types, 1 core thing. He didn't drown them in information. He packaged his thoughts so neatly, so powerfully that people began to think he was a genius. He wasn't a genius. He was just disciplined. He was preparing his words while everyone else was busy vomiting theirs. But the mental game was only half the war. The physical game was where the territory was truly conquered. He studied the primal subconscious triggers of human behavior. He learned that before a single syllable leaves your mouth, your body has already announced your value to the room. He stopped crossing his arms. He stopped hiding his hands in his pockets. He realized that for thousands of years of human evolution, hidden hands signaled a hidden weapon. Hidden hands signaled danger, deceit, and terror, so he brought his hands above the table always. He kept them visible, open, and relaxed. He used explanatory gestures, shaping his ideas in the air, creating a visual rhythm that hypnotized his listeners. He anchored a physical trigger to his environment. Every single time he walked through a door frame, whether it was the entrance to a boardroom, a coffee shop, or his own bedroom, he used the physical frame of the door as a psychological reset. He pulled his shoulders down and back. He lifted his chin. He straightened his spine. He stepped into the room projecting the exact physical geometry of a king, even when his stomach was twisting in knots and the eyes the god-tier superpower of eye contact. He used to stare at the floor. He used to look at his shoes. Now he practiced the 50-70 rule. When he spoke, he held their gaze 50% of the time. When he listened, he locked onto their eyes 70% of the time. He didn't stare like a psychopath. He didn't glare. He looked softly, intensely, reading the micro-expressions flashing across their faces. He watched the slight raise of an eyebrow, the tiny tightening of the lips, the rapid blinking that signaled anxiety. He stopped hearing just their words and started reading their souls. He stopped standing like a victim and started standing like a commander. And when he took this newly forged armor into the real world, the results were violent. He walked into a networking event that used to paralyze him with fear. He didn't hover by the food table. He didn't hide in the bathroom. He didn't cling to the one person he already knew. He stepped right into the social zone. He stopped asking the most pathetic, unimaginative, soul-crushing question in the English language. What do you do? He threw it out completely. He realized that asking someone what they do forces them into a robotic script they've recited 1,000 times. It strips the humanity out of the interaction. Instead, he deployed conversational sparks. He walked up to strangers and asked, "What's the absolute highlight of your week so far?" He asked, "Are you working on any personal passion projects?" He asked, "What's keeping you busy outside of the office?" He watched their brains short-circuit for a fraction of a second, and then he watched their faces light up. He was injecting pure dopamine into their nervous systems. He was giving them permission to talk about what they actually loved. He mastered the AR framework. Anchor, reveal, encourage. He would walk up to a group, anchor himself to the shared reality by making a confident, positive observation about the room. Then he would reveal one tiny, humanizing, vulnerable detail about himself to prove he was safe. And finally, he would encourage them to speak by asking an open-ended question. And then he deployed his ultimate weapon, active, lethal, predatory listening. He didn't just wait for his turn to speak. He hunted for the emotion beneath their words. He listened for the invisible cues. When they mentioned something that made their voice lift, he stopped the conversation and dug in. When they mentioned a struggle, he didn't offer unsolicited garbage advice. He didn't try to fix them. He mirrored their emotion. He validated their reality. He used complete empathetic sentences. That sounds incredibly frustrating. I can see why that would be so exciting for you. He stopped trying to be the hero of the story. He became the spotlight operator. He swiveled the massive blinding beam of his attention onto the person standing in front of him. He made them feel like they were the only human being left on planet Earth. He remembered their names, repeating them 3 times in the conversation, anchoring the sound to their visual image in his mind. He remembered their details. The next time he saw them, he didn't say, "How are you?" He said, "How did that presentation go last Tuesday? How is your daughter's soccer team doing?" He became an addiction to the people around him. They couldn't get enough of him. They didn't know why, but they felt taller, smarter, and funnier when they were in his presence. They didn't realize they were being systematically elevated by a man who had mastered the precise science of human connection. He was balancing the 2 scales of charisma perfectly, projecting massive, intimidating competence with his posture and tone, while radiating intense, undeniable warmth with his smiles, his nods, and his empathy. He was unstoppable. The promotion started rolling in. The circle of fiercely loyal friends expanded. The quiet, terrifying respect from his peers became palpable in every room he walked into. He was no longer the invisible ghost. He was the center of gravity. But holding the room in a casual setting is one thing. Mastering the mechanics when the stakes are low, when you have time to breathe, when you're talking to peers and strangers at a cocktail party, that is just the training ground. That is just the sparring mat. You can build the armor, you can memorize the frameworks, you can practice the pauses and record the videos until your eyes bleed. But eventually, the universe is going to demand a real sacrifice. Eventually, you're going to be thrust into a room where the air is thin, where the people sitting across from you hold the keys to your entire future. Where one wrong word, one stutter, one collapse in your posture doesn't just cost you a conversation, it costs you the life you were supposed to live. He had conquered the small rooms, but he was about to face the fire. And what he encountered next, The absolute soul-crushing pressure of the ultimate test was going to demand a level of execution that he didn't even know he possessed, because everything he had learned was about to be challenged by the one thing no amount of practice can fully prepare you for. The ultimate test wasn't a presentation. It wasn't a speech to a crowded auditorium. It was a man sitting across from him who had just lost everything. A man whose micro-expressions screamed pure, unadulterated hostility and terror. The air in the room was thick enough to choke on. Every panicked instinct told him to speak, to fill the suffocating void, to vomit data and logic and empty platitudes in a desperate attempt to fix the unfixable. But he didn't. He used the 3-second rule. He sat in the fire. He let the silence stretch until it was deafening. He didn't cross his arms. He exposed his chest. He leaned forward, unshielded, unbroken. And instead of pitching a solution, he asked one devastatingly simple, deep question. What does this actually mean to you? The dam broke. The hostility wasn't anger. It was fear. Pure, visceral fear. And for 8 unbroken minutes, he just listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't hijack the pain with his own stories. He held space. He became a sanctuary. And in that boardroom, a hostile adversary completely melted into a fiercely loyal ally. Not because of a brilliant argument, because one human being finally gave another the permission to be entirely unapologetically seen. Listen to me. That power, that exact terrifying, beautiful power, it is yours now. The days of standing in the shadows are over. The days of being the best-kept secret in the room are dead and buried. From this exact second forward, you are stepping into a completely different reality. You are going to walk into rooms and you're going to dictate the emotional temperature. You will no longer be the victim of awkward silences. You will be the absolute master of them. Imagine the sheer undeniable force of walking into a networking event, a high-stakes negotiation, or a crowded dinner party and knowing with absolute unshakable certainty that you can connect with anyone. You will never again rely on the weather. You will never again ask the soul-crushing robotic question, what do? You are going to use the frameworks of the elite. You are going to deploy S.O.F.T.E.N and HEFE not as cheap parlor tricks, but as master keys to unlock the human heart. You will bypass the shallow garbage and ask about their family, their occupation, their recreation, their dreams. You will watch their posture shift. You will pivot to their hobbies, their experiences, their future, their education. You will look them in the eyes and watch the exact moment their brain floods with dopamine simply because someone is finally asking them about the fire burning inside them. You will become a master of the unspoken. You will read a room like a predator reads the wind, but your only prey is profound connection. You will use the soften technique until it becomes your second nature. You will smile, but not that plastic terrified grin that screams insecurity. You will look at them. You will take them in. You will pause for 1 full second, and then you will let a warm, flooding smile wash over your face, telling their subconscious, this is just for you. You will keep an open posture. No more crossed arms protecting your chest. You will expose your vital organs to the room because you are no longer prey. You will lean forward. You will close the gap. You will use appropriate touch to build an instant biological bridge of trust. You will maintain eye contact that doesn't dart away in a panic. You will use sticky eyes, holding their gaze a fraction of a second longer than normal, making them feel like they are the only human being left on the planet. And you will nod. You will validate their existence without saying a single word. You will stop asking for permission to enter conversations. You will use the AR method. You will drop an anchor, a shared reality, a mutual observation that binds you together in the moment. You will reveal a piece of your own humanity, exposing a vulnerability that disarms their defenses. And then you will encourage them. You will hand them the microphone and let them shine. You will become a mesmerizing, magnetic storyteller. You won't just dump facts on people. You will build a story stack. You will drop a hook that yanks them by the collar. You will expose a struggle that proves you bleed exactly like they do. You will paint with vivid, intoxicating words that hijack their imagination. And then you will throw the boomerang. You will bounce the spotlight right back onto them. You will make them the hero of the interaction. You will no longer fear the silence. The silence is going to become your greatest weapon. When a conversation pauses, you won't panic. You won't rush to fill the void with meaningless, frantic chatter. You will sit in the quiet. You will let the tension build. You will give the other person the vast open space to process, to think, to reveal their deepest, most guarded truths. Because you know now that the most profound things a human being can say are always said just after the silence. Think about the impact this will have. Think about the empire you're about to build. You're going to become a highlighter. You're going to walk through this world actively, relentlessly hunting for the greatness in other people. You're going to find their hidden strengths, their quiet victories, their buried talents, and you're going to shine a massive, blinding spotlight on them. You will introduce your friends and colleagues not just by their names, but by their triumphs. You will make the people around you feel 10 feet tall. And because you make them feel unstoppable, they will become addicted to your presence. They will follow you anywhere. This is the Pygmalion effect in raw, violent action. when you expect the absolute best from people, when you treat them like they are brilliant and capable and fascinating, they literally become brilliant and capable and fascinating. You will speak their greatness into existence. And it goes deeper. You will master the friendship formula. You will understand that elite relationships are not left to chance. They are engineered. Proximity, frequency, duration, intensity. You will intentionally place yourself in the right rooms. You will show up consistently. You will invest the heavy, unglamorous hours, and you will dial up the intensity by being ruthlessly curious, by bearing your own soul, by asking for advice to prove your vulnerability. You will realize that every single human being on this earth is walking around with an invisible sign around their neck that screams, "Make me feel important, make me feel understood." And you will be the one person in the room who actually reads the sign. You will decode their primary values. You will listen fiercely to their complaints and their brags. You will figure out if they are driven by love, by service, by status, by money, by goods, or by information. And once you know what they value, you will speak to them entirely in their own language. You will feed their deepest self-image back to them. You will deliver the killer compliment. You will look them dead in the eyes and validate the exact beautiful quality they hope the world sees in them. You will become a master of emotional translation. But look at me. Look directly at me. This is the most crucial part of everything we have talked about. This is the reason I'm grabbing you by the shoulders right now. This is not just about getting a promotion. This is not just about closing a massive deal. This is not just about getting a date or being the most popular charismatic person at a dinner party. If that is all you use this for, you have missed the point entirely. This is about the legacy you're going to leave on this earth right now out there in the world. There are people who are drowning in the exact same isolation you just crawled out of. There are people sitting in crowded rooms surrounded by bodies, screaming silently on the inside, desperate for just one person to actually see them. They are hiding behind their phones. They are burying their brilliance. They are suffocating under the weight of their own awkwardness because they are terrified of being rejected. You are going to be their lifeline. You are going to walk up to the person standing alone at the edge of the room. You're going to look them in the eye. You're going to drop an anchor. You're going to ask them a real question. You're going to hold space for their answer. You're going to pull them out of the dark. You're going to heal relationships that have been broken for years because you finally know how to listen with intention. You're going to stop reacting and start responding. You are going to listen to understand, not just to reply. You are going to use pure weaponized empathy to bridge chasms that seemed impossible to cross. You are going to validate their feelings before you ever try to fix their problems. You are going to build a tribe, a community, a family of people who feel deeply, intensely loyal to you because you gave them the greatest, rarest, most precious gift one human being can ever possibly give another, your true, unfiltered, absolute presence. This is your new standard. This is the new baseline of your existence. You don't need another book. You don't need another tutorial. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. Feeling ready is a comfortable lie created by cowards to justify their hesitation. You have the tools. You have the frameworks. You know the exact mechanics of human connection. The only thing standing between the ghost you used to be and the titan you are absolutely going to become is action. Not tomorrow. Not next week, not when the conditions are perfect. Now you must take this into the fire. You will step into the discomfort. The very next room you walk into, the very next person you see, you will square your shoulders, you will drop your shield, you will look them dead in the eyes, and you will connect. You have spent your entire life waiting in the dark for someone to finally walk into the room and understand you without realizing that your true destiny was always to become the light that understands them. And when you finally realize that, when you finally understand that you are not the one needing to be saved, but the one capable of saving others, everything in your reality bends to your will. You become the architect of the atmosphere. Picture it. Picture the very next room you walk into. It is a room full of noise, full of distraction, full of people desperately trying to prove their worth, shouting over each other, hiding their insecurities behind forced laughter and shallow chatter. But not you. Not anymore. You cross the threshold and the energy shifts. You don't pull out your phone. You don't look at the floor. You stand in the launch stance. Your shoulders are pulled down and back. Your chest is open and your hands are visible. Relaxed, entirely unshielded. You are projecting absolute, undeniable certainty. You move with purpose. You don't fidget. You don't pick at your nails. You don't touch your face. You are completely still. And in that stillness, you command the entire space. You approach a group, and you don't offer a quick, nervous plastic grin. You look at them. You take them in for 1 full second, soaking in their persona. And then you let a massive, warm, flooding smile wash over your face and spill directly into your eyes. That split-second delay tells their subconscious that this smile isn't a performance. It is entirely exclusively for them. You extend your hand, a firm, steady grip. You make eye contact, not a passing glance, but sticky, magnetic eye contact. You hold their gaze, reading the subtle shifts in their expression, making them feel like the rest of the room has simply ceased to exist. And then you speak, but your voice is different now. It doesn't shake. It doesn't rise at the end of your sentences like you are begging for permission or apologizing for your existence. You have eliminated the uptalk. You have stripped away the weak, hesitant filler words, the essentialities, the literalities that used to dilute your power. You draw breath from deep within your chest. You speak in your optimal resonant pitch. And when you finish a profound statement, you drop your tone, anchoring your words with absolute devastating authority. You sound like a titan. You sound like truth. When they ask you a question, you don't panic. The emergency alarms in your brain do not fire. You deploy the 3-second rule. 1, 2, 3. You let the silence hang in the air. You let the anticipation build. And in those 3 seconds, you project a profound, unshakable composure. You look like a sniper locking onto a target. And when you finally answer, you don't ramble. You don't speak in frantic, chaotic circles. You use the 321 framework. You deliver 3 crisp steps, 2 distinct types, and 1 massive, memorable core truth. You package your brilliance so cleanly, so masterfully, that the people listening to you lean in, hanging on every single syllable. But your true power, your absolute unfair advantage comes when you stop talking. You become a master of the S.O.F.T.E.N framework, not as a trick, but as a weapon of profound empathy. You smile. You maintain an open posture, completely uncrossed and receptive. You lean forward, closing the gap, signaling a deep primal curiosity. You use appropriate touch to build an instant biological bridge. You hold that eye contact and you nod, validating their existence without uttering a single sound. You are listening with your entire body. You refuse to engage in the mind-numbing, soul-crushing small talk that keeps the rest of the world trapped in superficiality. You banish the question, "What do you do?" from your vocabulary. You know that forces people into robotic scripts. Instead, you spark pure dopamine in their brains by asking questions that ignite their souls. You ask, "What is your personal passion project right now?" You ask, "What was the absolute highlight of your week?" You use the Ford method, family, occupation, recreation, dreams to navigate directly to what matters most to them. You pivot to HV, hobbies, experiences, future, education to build a deep, enduring dialogue. You hunt for their hot buttons. You watch their eyes widen, their hands animate, their posture shift as they finally get to speak about the fire burning inside their chest. And you just listen. Active, predatory, deeply intentional listening. You don't listen to reply, you listen to understand. You hear the emotions vibrating beneath their words. When they finish a sentence, you don't hijack the conversation with your own story. You don't desperately shout, "Me too," you use the AR method. You anchor the moment with a shared observation. You reveal a small, vulnerable piece of yourself to prove you are safe. And then you encourage them to keep going, to go deeper, to give you more. You wait for the pause, you embrace the silence. You let the quiet stretch out, knowing that the most profound, life-altering truths a human being will ever share are always spoken right after the silence. You are building an empire of connection. Every single conversation is a metal link. Every time you talk to a stranger, you forge a new link. And with every subsequent interaction, that link turns into an unbreakable chain. You are weaving a massive global web of influence, one human heart at a time. Because you understand the friendship formula now, you know that deep relationships are not accidents of fate. They are engineered. You master proximity, putting yourself in their orbit. You increase frequency and duration, investing the heavy, unglamorous hours of showing up consistently, and you dial the intensity up to the absolute maximum by being ruthlessly curious, by maintaining mutual gaze, by mirroring their posture, by deploying intimate, authentic self-disclosure. You match their mood, you echo their words, you speak to their primary values. Whether they are driven by love, status, information, or service, you speak their exact emotional language. You become a storyteller whose words echo in their minds for weeks. You build your story stack, you drop a hook that violently yanks their attention, you reveal a struggle, a moment of failure, a flash of vulnerability that proves you bleed exactly the way they do. You use vivid, potent imagery that lights up their sensory cortex, and then you throw the boomerang. You bounce the spotlight right back onto them, asking them how they would have handled it, making them the ultimate hero of the interaction. You become a highlighter. You walk through the world with a massive, blinding spotlight, actively hunting for the hidden greatness in every single person you meet. You introduce them with raving enthusiasm, branding them with positive labels that force them to stand taller. You deploy the Pygmalion effect. You expect them to be brilliant. You treat them like they are extraordinary, and miraculously they become brilliant and extraordinary in your presence. You deliver the killer compliment, looking them dead in the eye and validating the exact beautiful quality they desperately hope the world sees in them. You become an absolute addiction to the people around you. They will crave your energy. They will follow you anywhere. This is what power actually looks like. It is not loud. It is not arrogant. It is not dominating the room with a booming voice and a fragile ego. It is the quiet, devastating power of holding space for another human being. It is the power of turning an adversary into a fiercely loyal ally simply by asking, "Can you help me understand what's been most frustrating for you?" and then sitting in the fire with them while they answer. It is the power of vulnerability. You use the Franklin effect. You ask for advice. You admit your gaps. You let your guard down and show them your scars. And in doing so, you give them the ultimate permission to drop their heavy, suffocating armor. And finally, be real with you. Picture the life that is waiting for you when you master this. Picture the boardrooms where your ideas are not just heard but championed. Picture the negotiations where you don't fight for leverage but naturally command respect because your competence is perfectly balanced with overwhelming warmth. Picture the relationships, the deep, unshakable, fiercely loyal bonds you're going to forge. Picture the family dinners where you finally hear what your partner is actually trying to say, where you bridge chasms of misunderstanding because you know how to read the fear beneath their anger. Picture the sheer exhilarating freedom of walking into a room full of strangers and feeling zero anxiety, zero panic, only a calm, predatory thrill because you know the mechanics of human connection. You know exactly how to unlock every single mind in that room. This is your legacy. You are no longer a passive participant in your own life. You are a catalyst. You're going to walk through this world healing broken people simply by listening to them. You're going to elevate the junior employee who feels invisible. You're going to disarm the angry client by validating their reality. You are going to look into the eyes of the exhausted, burned-out stranger and give them the rare, breathtaking gift of your unfiltered presence. You are going to pull people out of the dark. You are going to become a force of nature, a titan of empathy, a master of the unspoken. But none of this, absolutely none of it matters if it stays in your head. Knowledge without execution is just intellectual entertainment. Reading the books, watching the videos, memorizing the frameworks, it is all entirely worthless if you do not step into the arena. The time for preparation is over. The time for hiding behind excuses is dead. You do not need another tutorial. You do not need to wait until your anxiety magically vanishes. You do not need to wait until you'll feel ready. Action cures fear. Execution creates confidence. You're going to take this out into the world. Now, the very next time you cross a doorway, the very next time you step into an elevator, the very next time you sit across from a human being, you're going to pull your shoulders back, you're going to bring your hands into the light, you're going to look them dead in the center of their eyes, you're going to embrace the terrifying, beautiful silence, and you're going to speak. Do not let the ghost of who you used to be dictate the empire of who you're about to become. Your voice is the most powerful instrument on this earth.